Dr. David Klee has over 30 years experience as both a teacher of the flute and as a professional musician. He has performed in all kinds of musical organizations, ranging from classical orchestras to heading his own jazz group, the Jazz Express. With these Pro Minute video series, Dr. Klee will share some of his secrets with you on how to become a better flutist. Hello, my name is Dr. David Klee, and welcome to another Pro Minute. Today we're going to take a look at alternate fingerings. There comes a time where regular fingerings between two different notes are really difficult to execute and to really make them play smoothly. So what we're going to look at today are some alternate fingerings that will hopefully make this easier for you. And what should be coming up on your screen right now are some examples. And we're going to take a look at these examples, and also what will be coming up on your screen will be the alternate fingerings. So let's take a look at example number 1. If you look at example number 1 and you look at the second measure, you look at that C sharp. And what happens is all C sharp 2s on all flutes, I don't care if it's student line or professional, they're very sharp. They're anywhere from 25 to 50 cents sharp on a tuner. So, you're doing all kind of strange things trying to get the pitch down. But there's a real fundamental thing you can do here. One of them is called, and here comes the chart demonstrating this, you can add the 3 fingers in the right hand. The reason why, if you listen to it, you can actually hear the difference. Here's without the fingers added, here's with them added. There's a little bit lower. And if you had a tuner, you could watch a tuner go down about 10 or 15 cents. And so now I'm going to play the exercise without the added fingers, and I'll play it with the added fingers. And you can look at the diagram of the C sharp with the added fingers. Okay, and of course you heard it. It's very, very sharp. So I'm going to try not to lip it down when I get to there. I'm just going to add the fingers and you'll hear the difference. Hear the difference? Very profound. And in fact, it's so profound, I teach all my students just keep those fingers down all the time on C sharp 2. All the time. Alrighty. Let's take a look now at example number 2. This is where we're going to try something here where normally when you got to play from C sharp to D, the only way to do it is to literally move your hands. Well, there are situations in music where the notes are so fast, it's really, really awkward. So coming up on your screen right now is a diagram for the alternate fingering, and what I've done here, you can just use your first trill key. Now the trill key, if you leave it down, it sounds pretty bad. It sounds pretty nasal. But in a situation where there is fairly fast movement, such as beat 2, where you see the C sharp, D, C sharp. And so all of a sudden it works very well. So now I'm going to play example number 2 using the trill key. It's much easier than. It's really difficult to play that way. So I would suggest trying that. And trying using that first trill key, going from C sharp to D, only in faster passages. Obviously, if you're going to sit on it a while, it'll sound really rough. Now, let's take a look at example 3. Coming up on your screen should be example 3. This is where we're going to use the second trill key from C sharp 3 to D 3. Now, C sharp 3 is, of course, the C sharp above the staff. And you probably remember the rule, hopefully you do. When you trill C to D in the staff, you always use the first trill key. Or C sharp to D in the staff, you always use the first trill key. Above the staff, it's always the second trill key between C or D, or C sharp and D. So what I'm doing here, I'm just going to use the second trill key. And you can see it works very well. Now I'll try to use a legit fingerings. Now for me, me, I've got a few years on most of you guys out there in flute land, so I can probably play a little smoother than somebody with less training. But that's a very difficult interval to play fast. And so the second trill key is very appropriate. Alrighty, let's go to example 4. Example 4 is, again, it's going to use just what I said, and that's where it's going to use the first trill key to go from C to D. So I'll play without. You can hear the hand slapping between the C and the D. Now I'm going to add just the trill key. Okay, now I'm going to play this example. Oh, it's so much easier with the trill key. I can think of numerous selections out there in flute literature that this would be a godsend to be able to play. It would make it so much easier. Alrighty, now let's go to example 5. Example 5, again, it's above the staff and it's going to be C to D. So this is where I'll just use the second trill key. So without the second trill key, it would sound like this. You can hear that little bump every time I go to the D and back to the C. Now I'm going to try it with the second trill key. In fact, I can go a whole lot faster because of that now. It makes it so much easier. So the second trill key above the staff works very well. Again now, if you have notes of value, notes that are going really slow, it will not sound good. But when it's fast, like a trill, it works. Alright, let's go to example 6. Now here, a perfect example of really awkward fingerings is if you go from the legit D to the legit E. When you go from D, of course, you've got 2 and 3 thumb, your first 3 fingers in your right hand. Then if you go to E, you've got to change to play E, which means your pinky's got to go down and your first finger's got to go down. So if I play it that way, it's a little more awkward. I can do it, but it's definitely awkward. So there's a neat way I learned when I started playing orchestra. Some orchestral flutists showed me this. If you got a fast passage between D and E, as the diagram illustrates, just raise your ring finger in your right hand, like you're trilling. It's so much easier. You can literally fly that way. Let's go now to example 7. Example 7 is that same interval, D to E, except being it's in the 3rd octave, it's a different fingering for the 2 notes. So if you remember your D, your high D, you know, it's thumb 2 and 3. And then the E, you've got, you know, both hands involved. So if I were to play this with the legit fingerings, again, it's going to be, it's awkward. You know, it's very easy to crack the tone and have other fingering issues. But here's where, instead of doing that, now what's coming up, you'll see it on the little fingering diagram, I just, like you're trilling from D to E, you just move your ring finger. Instead here, of course, you do it in triple. There we go. So I think you'll find that's a whole lot easier than trying to do the 2 full hand movements between the 2 notes. Alrighty, let's look at example 8. Example 8 now, we're going to do it from E 1 or 2 or F sharp 1 or 2. In other words, it could be the bottom of the staff or the top of the staff. It'll be the same fingering. Alrighty, so now we're looking at that now. The problem is, to go from E to F sharp, it's a major hand change in the right hand. So I'm going to play it, you know, what will happen is you have E, where in the right hand your first 2 fingers are down, then you go to your legit F sharp, you got to raise those 2 fingers and lower the 3rd finger in the right hand. And it sounds like this. Again, there's an awkwardness. And so typically, if you don't know, you actually have 2 F sharps on your flute. You have primary F sharp. Primary F sharp is always ring finger, right hand, it's your 3rd finger. But you also have a secondary F sharp. The secondary F sharp is your middle finger in the right hand. It's the second finger. Now, the reason why you have a primary and a secondary is because the primary sounds better. I'll play them both. Here's the other one. It does not sound as good. So because of that, whenever you have a note of value, a note where it's held for a while, I would always use that primary F sharp fingering. But in a situation like this, example 8, oh my goodness, I would definitely use it, because then what happens, you have E, you have F sharp, you have E. It's like a trill from E to F sharp. So I'll play the whole exercise. Alrighty, now let's go to example 9. Example 9 is the same thing an octave higher. So you'll see what's coming up on your computer screen now, where think of the E trill fingering going to E to F sharp, where you finger E, high E, E3, and then you wiggle your thumb. So what I'm going to do is use that fingering in this pattern. And as you can see, it works very, very well. So again, I'm just thinking of the trill fingering from high E to high F sharp, which is wiggling your thumb. You move your thumb. Again, you can see it on the diagram, and it works very well. Now let's go to example 10. Example 10 is from high E to high F, natural. And if you remember your trill fingering, the diagram's coming up. Your trill fingering is just, you finger E and you wiggle your middle finger left hand. And so you can apply that to this kind of a pattern. It's so much easier. It is so much easier. It really works well. Alright, let's go to example 11. Now example 11, this is where you're on the staff. So you're going from F natural to F sharp. And this will work at the bottom of the staff or the top of the staff. Now again, this is where it's difficult, because F sharp is your third finger right hand, F natural is your first finger right hand. And if you play this legit, you can hear the clunkiness. You can hear the clunkiness between the fingers. So if I play this example 11 using that, it'll sound like... It's really, really awkward. But there's another way to do this, another orchestral fingering. What you can do is finger F sharp, but go ahead and when you need it, you'll just add your first finger. In other words, you're going to leave the F sharp finger down. And I'll play, it'll be like... Yes, it sounds just a little discolored. I'll play with and without the F sharp down. You can hear the difference. But in a fast passage, you're not going to hear the discoloration. What you're going to hear is cleanliness. So now I'm going to play this with that fingering that you see on your diagram. Much, much cleaner, isn't it? It's much easier. Alrighty. Now let's take a look at example 12. And this is where we all have this problem. And that's where C4, your high C. It's called playing it in tune. We all know how sharp it is, what kind of a pain it is to play. Well, coming up right now on your screen, there's your high C. And also what's coming up on your screen, you'll see an alternate fingering for it. So you'll finger a regular high C. You see the regular high C. But then what I typically do is add the second finger in my right hand. And it actually will lower the pitch by 15, 20, 25 cents on a tuner. And it really works well. Yes, it affects the tone a tiny bit, but in a lot of situations when you're doing ensembles and other things, pitch is more important than coloration, and you can get away with a little bit of that. So I'm going to try it without the finger down, then I'll add it. You can hear the difference. It's very, very distinct. You know, and particularly, you know, when you got like two flute players playing a high C together or something like that, God forbid, or even worse, two piccolo players. But it's really a neat way. I'll do it again without, and then I'll add it. It really is very dramatic. All right, now take a look at example 13. Here's another example where you're going from G sharp to A natural, and this would either work at the bottom of the staff or the top of the staff. And yes, you could wiggle both fingers in your left hand going from G sharp to A natural, but there's another way it's even easier. And so when you go from G sharp to A, just raise your ring finger in your left hand. Do not raise both your ring finger and your pinky instead of both. And what you'll find, I think it's actually easier. So that's something you could try with that. I think you'll like it. It really makes a difference. It makes it easier. Okay, and then finally, example 14. This is where you can play a high E natural. This is A3. How to play it softer. And when you play it softer, you can, and easier. It really, really works well. So what you could do here, when you finger a high A, instead of putting your right hand pinky on the E flat key, you could slide it down on the C sharp key. And you can play softer, and it sharpens it a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to try the high A I'm going to try the high A on the E flat key, and then I'll slide it down to the C sharp key, and you'll hear them both. So you can really hear how it actually gets a little more focused, a little sharper, and you'll be able to play it softer, and it really, really works well for you. Well, I hope these alternate fingers work well for you, and I look forward to the next time when I can present something new like this for you guys out there so we can be all fluting together and just having a good old time. This is Dr. David Klee. Until next time, thank you. Bye-bye.